Hi everyone, and welcome to this Access and HTA Challenges panel. We have a unique HPP case study to share with you today from these three remarkable women. But before I hand over to them, I just wanted to give you a bit of background to my position and why I've got this honour of hosting this panel today. So my name's Naomi Litchfield and I lead patient advocacy at Barnacle EMAS, and we're a CRO. And we specialise in running early access programmes for patients and families all around the world. I work closely with patient organisations and my EAP team to ensure that we incorporate the patient voice and reduce the patient burden. And this particular story has really resonated with me, and I'm excited for you all to kind of be inspired and learn from it. I have cared for many babies and children and families when I worked at Great Ormond Street Hospital in London, and I got to administer lots of different types of investigational medicines, and I saw the real impact that they had on these families' lives. And I think that for many rare families, it's a fight for access to investigational medicines, and it's not always an easy journey, even once you've got the access, how that's going to continue. And it's not always clear for even the healthcare professional, but also the pharma company, of how that's going to continue, and also what clinical data is needed and required to be collected. And it's often limited in the rare space. So this is going to highlight some of those challenges. And just to kind of emphasise, this is a UK example, and it is very different internationally. For every country has a different process, a different mechanism, different regulation for accessing investigational medicines, but also then going through the HTA regulator and payer process. And the rare kind of access HTA environment, I think, has changed substantially over the last 7 years since this HPP case study started. And I think that I'm optimistic that there'll be lots more positive developments for patients and families moving forward. And I hope that you're inspired today. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Meryl. Thank you so much for joining us. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself before we start, please?
Hello everyone, my name's Meryl and I'm mother to Maddox. My son, he's 7.5 now, and he has hypophosphatasia, which is a rare bone disease. And I've also started up a patient support group called Soft Bones UK.
Great, thank you so much. Lindsay.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Birrell. I'm CEO and co-founder of Realise Advocacy, but previously CEO of a patient organisation who worked with and supported the HPP community through the NICE process.
Thank you. Josie.
Hi everyone, I'm the other co-CEO and co-founder of Realise Advocacy. I previously set up and ran the highly specialised technology programme at NICE, and I've worked in a specialised pharmaceutical company as well, so bringing those perspectives today.
Perfect, thank you so much, ladies. So starting with Meryl, if you can just go back to the beginning from your diagnosis journey with Maddox, and how you then gained access to investigational medicine, and you're now on what they call a managed access agreement, which is due to end soon, I believe.
Yeah, that's it. So our journey started when our son was born. We weren't aware that he had a bone disease at the time, so nothing was picked up antenatally. So it wasn't until he was born we all started to notice a few things that weren't quite right. Failure to thrive, he wouldn't feed very well, he was a floppy baby, and then we ended up back at hospital support. So they were doing lots of different tests, and they put them all together. So he had low alkaline phosphatase, which is a blood test result, and low bone density, and they came up with a probable diagnosis of hypophosphatasia, which at the hospital that we were in at the time, they'd never come across before. So it was quite a stressful time. because they didn't know anything about the condition, so they couldn't kind of give us any more information or support. We were really fortunate. So he was given that probable diagnosis when he was a week and a half old, and the consultants were really on the ball. They were speaking to other kind of endocrine specialists at different hospitals. So the first port of call was to speak to Great Ormond Street Hospital, and they'd actually come across a child in Manchester with the same condition. And that was when we first kind of started to hear about investigational medicines and a possible trial drug for Maddox. It was a week later and we were transferred to one of the specialised centres, and I believe Maddox was the first baby that they treated with the condition. So again, quite a scary time, but we felt really fortunate. He started on the drug at 3 weeks old.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, so from then on, we saw his condition improve. We started to reach out to some other families that were going through a similar thing, all at different stages. And then it was about a year later, and I just returned to work. We were then home. We'd moved home back from the specialised centre, and we were invited to fill out a questionnaire all about our experience on the trial drug. And that was kind of when I first realised the drug might not be approved. I don't know why, it just never really entered our head. Like, we just thought, oh, the drug is it's working, it's a miracle drug for us. You know, it's before the drug it was palliative care, so it was our only hope. And I guess I didn't really realise that the whole kind of process of having a trial drug and having it, you know, the process to getting it approved, and all kind of everything that goes into that. So I filled out a questionnaire. I was invited to be a patient representative on the panel, and then that was approved as part of the managed access agreement, fortunately. So that's where we are now.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that background and insight. That's an incredible story. But just to kind of touch on your main challenges, really, I know that there was a lot, but thinking about getting that access and then getting onto the managed access agreement, what were those main challenges that you encountered? And I know that you were saying you were speaking to lots of different families, and obviously you work with lots of different families now with soft bones, so thinking about their stories as well. Internationally, do you think that was very different for the access for those families to here in the UK?
Yeah, so there was a family that had to be moved to Canada to start treatment. He was the first infants in the UK, so they had to move to start treatment. So, and I believe they were over there for about a year, and that was because at that time, that was before Maddox. At that time, that was the only centre that was approved to give the drug on infants. So that's why they had to move over there. And also, there's a couple of families that didn't kind of meet criteria for the trial. So then they had to try and access the drug compassionately. So again, it's a constant fight and it's a worry. We were transferred to the specialised centre, but we still had to complete certain tests, have to be within a certain range for Maddox to gain access to the drug. So then it's like, well, what if he doesn't meet criteria? What will happen then? Will he be eligible for compassionate use or not? So, you know, you're trying to live each day with a child that's really sick, and try and get by. I was a new parent, so it's, you know, my world was turned upside down. I had to move hundreds of miles away from home and my family support network. And then also the stress of, we know there's a drug that's effective. Can we get it? Are we eligible? What do we do if we can't? And I know that one of the families, they had talks about possibly having to move to Germany to access the drug at one point. So they were getting passport photos made. So yeah, it's just added stress to already a really stressful time for families. So I think that's when it's really important to reach out to other families. And I guess that's why Soft Bones came about, because to provide, you know, patient support group, so we could all discuss what was going on, our stresses, and kind of everyone else kind of understood. So it's nice to have that outlet, because it's really stressful.
Yeah, I can absolutely imagine. I think that there's only one thing worse than being diagnosed with a life-threatening condition. It's being told that there is a treatment, but you might not be able to access it, or no one will pay for it, or, you know, that kind of terrible situation. So thank you for sharing that. And I'm sorry that you went through all that challenge, but I'm so glad that Alex got access and that he's still having access here today. And support wise, did you get a lot of support from a patient organisation back then?
Yeah, so we so it's Metabolic Support UK, so they were in contact with me and worked alongside Lindsay, and they kind of helped me in the whole managed access agreement process. So prior to that, wasn't it? It was in the NICE process, because sitting in a panel can be quite daunting.
Sorry.
Someone else there with you to support you and enable you to give your own voice was really important. Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Rowan. I'm glad that you had Lindsay there with you. So Lindsay, can you share your unique insights of how you supported Meryl and the rest of the HPP community?
Yeah, thanks for sharing that story again, Meryl. No, it was 7 years ago, but I feel like I remember it like it was yesterday. And it's certainly been one of the highlights of my career, working with you and your family and seeing all the amazing things you've done with Soft Bones now as well, to help other families who are going through a similar situation. And knowing that you've done that with all of that you've just described, and all the stress and all the difficulties that you've had, is, you know, it is inspiring, and it's definitely been a highlight for me to know you and your family. I guess when I first started at Metabolic Support UK, or was Climb 7 years ago, I had no idea, you know, what the NICE process was exactly, or how to navigate it, or how to support a patient group through it. So unfortunately for you, you didn't come knocking on the door of an expert, I'm afraid. But I guess 7 years forward, I guess that's why myself and Josie feel so passionate about the work of Realise Advocacy, because we kind of want to take all of that learning and all of that difficulty and all of that stress and make things a lot more simple and less stressful for the next group who find themselves going through this process, because it will happen. We have these processes in place. And, you know, what I think is one of the biggest things I learned from your story, Meryl, is how critical it is to have your insight and your knowledge about the condition in a process like this, particularly with HPP, which is ultra rare. You know, we've already said this was like one of the first treatments to go through NICE, one of the, you know, the first treatments to go through a brand new process. The company, the patient organisation, yourselves, we didn't know what to expect. Everything was kind of a feeling of being on the back foot, and not really knowing, I guess, what was going to happen, and things were kind of being unravelled, you know, day by day, and we're trying to keep on top of it. Yeah, I guess one of the biggest challenges really was understanding what exactly was going to happen, and where could the HPP community, or that was you at the time, because you were the one that was on the panel and in the committee meetings and the voice of the community, how did you know where to speak in the meetings, which bits to focus on, where could you add insight that might help a committee understand clinical data in a better way? And so it was a really huge, steep learning curve really for all of us. I think the fact that there was really no expert that you could go to for support, and that we were all sort of just learning as we went along. And, you know, luckily, being the chief executive Klein, you know, we had resources, albeit limited, but we had them, you know, and we didn't have to worry about getting a train to the NICE meeting, you know, we could do that. But when I think about small patient organisations who don't have that luxury, it's really, really difficult for them to even be able to be involved in having a seat around the table. So yeah, so many challenges, and I do think a lot of it was because it was the very first really of its kind. You know, it's the first metabolic bone disorder, the first treatment for one like that, going through this brand new process. And I think the biggest thing as well, and you've talked about this, but not knowing what to expect, but also how long the process is going to go on for, and what happens to patients in the meantime if they have children who are born with this condition. What happens? And I think, you know, I got the sense, and you know, it sort of the memories come flooding back, but that there is no real straight answer for patients in those situations. You know, you said, well, if he can't get on a clinical trial, then what will happen? Or if he can't get compassionate use, then what will happen? Or if the managed access agreement ends, what will happen? Or if NICE say no, what will happen? And there being this kind of like black hole where no one actually really knows the answer. And I think, again, it's about helping the patient groups and patients understand what they can do in those moments, because they can feel very, very helpless and powerless, stuck in a massive process and a massive system. What can you actually focus on, I think, is really important.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Lindsay, for those insights and that unique story that you've been through together. So thank you. And I'm going to go to Josie now, who can share some very exciting expertise and insights from an ex-HTA and payer, but also from an industry point of view of the complex journey that both Lindsay and Meryl went on, and the different kind of backgrounds that you've got and insights to a new process that both the pharma company and the patient group went through.
Yeah, I think Thurston says it was new for us too. You know, sitting in NICE and setting up a program, really trying to find something that would work in what was the new world of a new NHS back then. I think everyone was learning. It's fair to say, and I think there had been it's been progress. Things have changed to a large extent in the wonderful world of HTA over the last 7 years. So, you know, NICE, to stick with the UK and with this example of HPP, the NICE process and methods, we know there have been big consultations last year on what that would look like and the changes that have been put into place. And hopefully that's become, you know, more streamlined, more flexible and more receptive to rare conditions generally. That said, I think a lot has not changed. So actually, they're still interested in the same questions, in answering the same issues. And we still want to know, you know, does a product work? What's the unmet need that's being met? Just how effective is it? And what value for money is that offering? Does it work for the health system in question? And that's whether it's NICE, whether it's the Scottish Medicines Consortium, or whether we're moving out of the UK and into other countries. Still interested in those same questions. I think one thing that's changed perhaps over the last 7 years, increasing focus on affordability and an increasing focus on looking at the scale and anticipating how many orphan products are coming through, how many treatments for rare diseases, how many gene therapies, can we continue to cope in the same way? So there is an anxiety there, I think, for what we call payers, for HTA agencies, and also for industry to understand how they will fit into that world. In terms of NICE, I think they still are one of the forefront really of engaging patients, even though that can still feel frustrating. And I think there are limits to what they can do. There are wonderful people like Heidi Livingstone who reach out to patients and really try to help make sure they understand the process, understand the systems. but there's a limit to what you can do when you're within an agency. I certainly remember and being very conscious of those limits myself. I think it's great that patients and patient advocates can come together and actually learn from peers and go beyond that. So that itself is quite different, I think, in different countries. There are very formal processes in the UK for how patients can engage. They may feel a bit different and sometimes a bit constraining. And I always urge patients not to necessarily just restrict themselves to thinking about what they've asked to think about, or restrict themselves to engaging in whatever the formal process is, because actually you have the expertise, you have the experience, and it's translating that into evidence that can help inform decision making through whatever the most appropriate route is. In other countries, there are sometimes less formal processes. The role and the importance of the patient contribution is perhaps less well recognized. Sometimes it's coming in through clinical voice. But again, I think for any patients here from outside of the UK, there are still opportunities to connect, still opportunities to engage. Perhaps it's through your clinical network. Perhaps it's making sure that your voice is rooted in through those more formal routes through them, or through finding different approaches to making sure that your message and your experience is understood. So it does vary in the experience country by country about how you engage in access processes, but the things that are important that those different agencies need to know, need to understand, remain the same. What's it like to really live with this condition? What's the impact on patients? What's the impact on families? And that's the physical impact, that's the practical impact of, have you had to give up work? How hard is it to travel? What are the demands of treatment? And those more, psychosocial impacts, the impact on a family of having a child with a rare life-limiting condition is immense. So those topics remain important wherever you are, and the expertise on those topics remains with the patients and the patient organisations wherever you are.
Completely agree. Thank you so much, Josie, for those insights. And coming back to Meryl, patients and families listening today, I'm sure there are, and I'm sure they're very inspired by your story. But if you were to say to them now that are maybe trying to fight for access to investigational medicine, or starting this kind of access journey, or maybe they're on that now and they're moving on to the kind of HTA, NICE, NHS England, or maybe in a different country process, is there anything that you can share from your unique journey with other patients and families listening today that would find it helpful?
I think the main thing that everyone should do is obviously seek support. You can't do this on your own. With daily life, living with a child with a rare disease, as you say, we've got normal kind of life stresses. Reach out and get the support you need to have your voice heard. That can be by speaking to other organisations, speaking to other families. I think it's really important to get engaged with the community as much as you can, and just make sure that you're filling out these questionnaires that get sent your way, because that's how our process started, and building good relationships with your clinicians. And
did you get much chance to engage with the pharma company?
Yeah, we did, through the committee meetings. Yeah, and they've been great in offering support and also listening to our voice. So listening to the needs that we have that don't feel that have been met.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it's really important to highlight engaging early as possible and getting that support, because it's a huge task and a mountain to kind of climb with lots of stresses on you. So reaching out as early as possible and getting that support where it's needed, but also I suppose meeting expectations of what's to come for both your families, the healthcare professionals, but also the pharma company itself, especially when they're all in a new process and learning. But if you can learn together and communicate well and be as open and transparent as possible, then that'll only be better for a more successful journey. And then, yeah, coming back to Lindsay, if there's any other kind of take-home messages for patients and families listening here today, and obviously kind of the new aspects of Realise Advocacy and everything that you're doing with Josie today, supporting families through this process, just to highlight those main things that you can do and support them.
Yeah, I think it's what Meryl's just said about seeking support and not being able to do it on your own is really important. And it's difficult to give a blanket kind of advice to all patient organisations because they're all so unique and so different. Some of them are well more resourced than others and have much more of an insight into stuff like this, whereas others are a group of patients, an ultra rare condition that, you know, are looking after sick children or sick family members. And I think what's really important if you're at that end of the scale is find an umbrella group, you know, like Climb or Metabolic Support, who can help you build your community for a start and relieve some of that burden, you know, because that's a big undertaking. And then I guess, you know, reach out for support around, you know, expertise on these types of processes and what they actually are and what they mean and how patient groups get involved in that. And I guess aside from sort of Realise Advocacy and what we're doing, I always found the best way to do that was reach out to other groups who've been through it and, you know, ask them what to expect. And I think the great thing about the rare disease community is the willingness to pass on what we've learned to other people. And I think that's why this particular example of you, Meryl, with your child is never going to go out of date, because actually it's just so important to pass on everything that you've learned to help other groups. So yeah, so I think, yeah, reach out, find support, make sure you've got your own support as well for whatever you've got going on at home and everything else. And then, you know, don't be afraid to ask as well. I think that's the thing. Don't be afraid to ask.
Thank you, Lindsay. That's great. And Josie, anything else to add?
I think just I'd probably wrap on saying, yes, it's great to engage early. Definitely ask for support. If you are engaging late, don't panic. I think that's a really important thing, because patients, patient organisations, they are the holders of so much expertise and experience. And actually with some support to translate that into something that is usable as evidence for these processes, you know, there's a lot you can do. But even if you are sitting thinking, I'm really late in the day and I'm getting really worried, you know, stay calm, find someone to support you, whether it's Realise Advocacy or someone else who's been through it, because there's still a lot you can do even late in the day.
Thank you. And yeah, just to say to Meryl, thank you so much for sharing your story here today. And I'm sure everyone's been very inspired by it and learned a lot. And that we're all happy to answer questions if anyone has any, and to contact Josie and Lindsay at Realise Advocacy if you are going through that and need some more support. And just, yeah, from me really to say also that if you're looking into early access clinical trials or starting that journey, to speak to your doctors, speak to your healthcare professionals. They're the ones that can request the access and help you through that start of that journey. So yeah, just to speak to the healthcare professionals from the start, and then engage with that patient group. If you don't have one that's umbrella of your condition, you know, look to the bigger organisations that are out there, and also that we're with other organisations like Realise Advocacy. They are there to help you through the next stage, the HTA process. And I think that Meryl would agree that if Realise Advocacy was born 7 years ago, there would have been lots of other things that would have been put in place. So thank you, ladies, for joining us today and giving us your unique insights and messages. And thanks for supporting all the different patient groups through this stressful but exciting and knowledgeable journey. And yeah, thanks, ladies, for joining me today. And we'll speak to you all soon.
Thank you.